It's a real honor to be here with you. We flew in yesterday, and I was really delighted to see that I decided to give up coffee for Lent and not donuts because I really like donuts, and I've already had 3 already, so thank you, organizers, for doing the donuts. So praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever. It's a great honor, as I said, to just share some words with you about the crisis in manhood. Deacon David Michael did a fantastic job talking about that crisis. And in the last 15 years that I've been leading men's ministry, I had some questions that I've always wanted to get answered. And it's taken me about 16 years to get them answered. So I'm going to share them with you because I'd like to reduce that learning curve for you. But let me tell you a little bit about myself. As Joe said, my name is Mark Houck. I'm a father. 6 beautiful children. I have 3 boys and 3 girls, and they're aged 10 down to 17 months. And my wife and I have been married for 10 years, and we've had 9 pregnancies in 10 years. So that's called Catholic action, right? It's an old movement in the church. So 3 babies waiting for us in heaven. You know, when we talk about the pro-life movement, we can't forget, of course, the miscarried children. And they're just as important as any child outside the womb, too. So those are saints in heaven, successful journeys. So that's a very important part of who I am. Being a father has really taught me more than anything that I ever read about manhood, any mentoring I ever received, anything I ever learned. My father passed away when I was a young man, so I didn't have a lot of mentoring from him. He died when I was 11 and was buried on my 12th birthday. Does that sound a bit of annoying to you, or should I stand a little closer to it? Is that annoying to you, that sound? Sounds like it's annoying to me. Okay, so Dad passes away, and I really was left with a great void in my life, of course, naturally. But I put my energies into athletics, and I pursued excellence in athletics. And it became idolatry for me. I was a football player, and I pursued professional football. I was actually scouted by the New England Patriots coming out of college and never made it at that level, but it really filled that void. And I think for a lot of us as men, sports can really replace God. For a lot of men today, sports replaces God. And it did for me, and it replaced Father for me. It replaced a lot of things. And when it all went away, I didn't really have anything. And I only share that with you because it really is a big part of why I do what I do today. And I asked myself that question, why do I do what I do today? Because I often ask the Lord to find somebody else to do what I do, which is full-time men's ministry. And he says, I can't find anybody dumber than you to do it. So I just say, okay. I honestly, I do tell him, I said, you know, this is not fun. This is fun. This stuff's great, speaking at men's conference. But fighting pornography, fighting the evils of abortion, defending traditional marriage, dealing with the crisis of masculinity in the church is not a pleasant experience. It's joyful. It's joyful. I'm sure our brothers would attest to that, but it's joyful. But that doesn't mean it's fun. So I had those questions that I asked myself, what does it mean to be a man? I really didn't know because my dad didn't really take me from boyhood to manhood. He passed away. If you're wondering why he passed away, he was a diabetic, so he passed away at 43. And then I really needed to know, what are the attributes or characteristics of manhood? Like, what are the qualities of manhood? Those are the things I wanted to know. And I'm going to develop that for you in this brief talk today, based upon the church's history and what we've learned and what the church has always taught and what we've forgotten in the last 100 years or so. Let's start with ancient Hebraic thought. Now, I'm no scholar, but that basically takes us to the book of Genesis, okay? The book of Genesis, we have Adam and Eve, and it's important that we see in Adam a little bit of our gifting. In fact, all of our gifting. You see, Adam was placed in the garden, as we know, and it was like a wilderness experience for him. He was all alone. And if there's something in you as men that desires to be in the wilderness, That's a good thing. And if there's something in you that says, I don't want to go into the wilderness, you should awaken that in yourself. It's in your nature. It's in your nature. You know, I'm an urban guy. I'm from Philadelphia. I didn't grow up I grew up around 400 acres of corn, but I was 45 minutes from the big city. And hunting in Pennsylvania is like a passion. I didn't hunt. The kids get a full day off from school the first day of hunting season. It's part of the life in Pennsylvania. But it wasn't my life. Again, I was into sports. But there's something in nature, men, that is core to who you are as men, that you must awaken, that you must find appreciation. If you can't look out here and appreciate what you're seeing, not just to share with your loved ones, but just appreciate that, the kind of wildness of the water, you know, the wildness of nature. It's core to who you are. And so Adam was placed in that situation, and he was all by himself. And God gave him a task. Does anyone remember what that task was? What was he supposed to do in the garden? Take care of it, tend the garden, right? But what else was he supposed to do? He had to name everything, right? He had to give name and assign a place for everything, a name for the animals specifically. See, that is your gifting. And I want to affirm this in you as men, because I don't want you to suppress it. Because it's in your gifting to problem solve. You have an issue like abortion, it's a man's fight. Father Mike Mannion, great pro-lifer, mentor, married my wife and I, dear friends with Blessed St. Teresa of Calcutta. He said the pro-life fight is a man's fight. It's a man's fight. Are you engaged in that fight? I mean, that's the reason why women are seeking abortion, because men have failed them. We have to be engaged. So that is like a primordial battle. And it's in your nature to engage in that fight. And so, but it's also in your nature to problem solve and to figure out how to do that. And so when your wife says, we got this and we have this and we're in crisis, you can manage that. You can shoulder that. She can't. She's born out of relationship. She's born out of the rib. And so she's not going to have that ability to categorize things. And this is a quality of manhood. This is important, right? You should know this about yourself, that this is a gifting that God gave you. Not to be like let go of, but to be used for good, for kingdom building, for kingdom work. And so embrace that. That's part of what it means to be a man. It's that great gift to problem solve. Women are born out of a relationship, as I said. That's why they go, by the way, to the bathroom with other women. They have to do things in community. And we like community too, but we can do things on our own too, and we're comfortable alone. When we go to ancient Greek thought, taking us in the past, you think of like Aristotle, Socrates, Plato. And I took philosophies at Catholic University where I went, and I fell asleep for most of those classes, but I would say this. When you look at these men that Aquinas and Augustine drew for inspiration and thought and guidance when it came to trailblazing these thoughts for the church for the very first time, they looked to Greek thought. And you think of Homer, and you think of the great writers in the Greek times, the Greek tragedies, Odysseus, Agamemnon, and the Trojan War. And you see these characters like Achilles and Hector and Priam and Odysseus again. And you see this great suffering equated with great heroism. You see that courage and bravery is a mark of manhood. It's in your nature to be courageous, to be brave. And there's a degree of suffering that these Greek mythology kind of writings kind of bring to us that really are left incomplete. And Augustine's able to pick up on that because because Christ wasn't in the world at that point. And there's this degree of suffering, this voluntary suffering, which we'll get into in a minute, that is manly. But so in the Greek thought, to be a man was to be a man of courage, to engage in battle, to not be afraid, to step into the breach, as Bishop Olmsted would say. That's who you are. And to suppress that, and to deny that, and to see the battles that are around you. And one of the things I'll talk about in the second talk today is how we've engaged in the anti-pornography fight. That's a huge battle. And many men are losing to it. But anyhow, there's a great degree of humility that has to be exercised. If you read the Iliad and you see, some of the characters in there, you see Priam, the father of Hector, who humbly goes and requests the body of his son, of Achilles. You see this great humility and manhood. It's very important. Be like me, Christ says, for I am meek and humble of heart. Humility is your strength. And we often equate that with weakness. And it is, in some respects. We lead with our weakness as men. That's something that I've learned in the last 15 years of working with men. Lead with your weakness, because that's where your strength lies. I know it's counterintuitive, but you got to lead it from that place. That might mean in sharing your story of weakness, of brokenness. Not always in every setting. Use discernment and wisdom. But we move into patristic thought, early patristic thought, the fathers of the church, St. Augustine. And he's the mentor of the King's Men Apostolate, which we started 15 years ago. No one writes like Augustine. He writes like for our times today. But, he was trailblazing these thoughts for the world a lot at that time. He says to fathers, fathers, men, you are head of your household. You're bishop of your home. You're bishop of your domestic church. Now, hopefully your children listen to that bishop versus your ordinary in your diocese, as everyone's been saying. We don't listen to the bishop, but listen to the father, right? Jesus was subject to his father. Jesus, isn't it amazing? Everyone is subject to Jesus, right? As the Savior, as the Master, the Messiah. Jesus is subject to his parents, Mary and Joseph. Yet everyone is subject to him, but he is subject to his parents. And so you as father are bishop of your home. And in the order of grace, it flows through you to the children. That's the way God intended it. And Augustine talked about this, so does St. John Chrysostom. And did you know that God has a preference for the male sex? Did you know that God has a preference for you? This is what St. Augustine says. Can I read this to you? In Sermon 51, he says this: He came as a man to show his preference for the male sex. And he was born of a woman to comfort the female sex. It is as though he made them a little speech and said, to show you that it's not any creature of God's that is bad, but that it's crooked pleasures that distort them. In the beginning, when I made man, I made them male and female. I don't reject and condemn any creature that I have made. So he talks about and asserts how God had to come as a man. But he had a choice. It's our great gift that he chose to be a man. But he's the new Adam. Right? He had to be that. But he could have done whatever he wanted to do, right? He's God. So in this idea of that God has a preference for a sex should give you great dignity. Yeah, I know John Paul II talked about the feminine genius. But there's a masculine genius too, brothers. And it's you. You have to embrace that and the gifting that God has given you. One thing that St. Augustine talks about in the City of God is his masterpiece. And again, I'm no scholar, but I read this and I extrapolated something I want to share with you that I learned in the last couple of years. There's a mark of manhood. Again, what does this mean to be man? What does it mean to be a man, and what are the qualities of manhood? That's what we need to know, and we need to live in work, in home, in community. And one of the marks of manhood is voluntary suffering. This is a mark of manhood. Augustine says this. In his book, City of God, he talks about a Roman soldier by the name of Marcus Regulus. He's a general in the Roman army. And they're fighting Carthage, and in this battle, he gets accosted, and he's a prisoner of war. And Carthage basically gives him an ultimatum that you will go back to Rome and negotiate peace, but you will negotiate it in terms that are favorable to Carthage. And essentially, Carthage would inherit lands and maintain certain lands that Rome was trying to take. And so they made him take an oath. And they said, you need to go back and do this. And he says, I will. And he journeys, and they set him free. So when he gets to Rome, they greet him and they embrace him. And Augustine is so impressed by this man. Now, he's got the martyrs. He's got the martyrs of the faith already to impress him. But he's so impressed because this man does not know Jesus. But this man is an authentic man. And this is what he does. He arrives in Rome, and they greet him, and they embrace him, and they say, stay, we'll protect you. He says, no, I have to go back. I gave my word. Are you a man of your word? That's something we all have to ask ourselves when we say yes to, let your yes be yes, says sacred scripture. Let your no mean no. When you say yes to God, you're all in, brothers. It's not like yes for 40 days and then, okay, I go back to my way of doing it. We're all in. And so Regulus says to the Romans, he says, no, I have to go back. He says, they want me to negotiate terms for you, with you, but they're not favorable to Rome. They're not favorable to Rome, so I'm not going to offer them to you. And he goes back to Carthage, and he dies a horrible death. They basically press boards, and they keep him standing erect till he is dispatched with nails coming out of the board. So basically he dies from exhaustion, and these nails are pressed in on against him. Horrible death. But Augustine is so impressed by this. He says, this is a mark of manhood. This willingness to voluntarily suffer for a cause that's greater than you. Pro-life movement, we've talked about that. We've had great witness to that today already. But that's Christ, is it not? No greater love as a man than this. So whereas the Greeks really have this tragic hero, and they don't have the redemptive element of it all, we have Christ and we have the tragic hero, but we have the redemption of the cross. And so Aquinas and Augustine are able to flesh this out better for us. And when we fast forward to the medieval times, we see the chivalric period. Chivalry. This came from the Catholic Church, men. The Catholic Church created the code of chivalry, created this. Why? I don't know. Maybe at that time it was in question. But the knights, the feudal system, and the codes that emerged out of it all emerged from the church. And we've lost that. Men laying down their lives for women, protecting women and children. Cheval is the French word for horseman, horse like a knight. Jesus was the first knight. He died for his mother, right? Mary, who basically was the church. The church stood on her yes. She was the whole church. He dies, he lays down his life for his mom and for us. And he's like the first knight. So it makes sense that the chivalric period would come out of the church. Men, we've lost this code of chivalry. What does it mean to be a man? To honor and esteem women? Oh, yes. When was the last time you stood up when a woman walked into a room? We don't do it anymore. Some men do. I think we should restore that. I think we should reclaim that. Do you curse around women? Do you speak poorly around women? Do you curse at all? Father talked about that today. But just your language. Do you elevate your language when you're around a lady? When I say something off color, my wife will say, excuse me? You don't talk like that around me. Where do you think you are? You know, and she'll correct me. She'll strip me down, you know, not physically, but that's later. No, just no, but she'll right the ship. Women have a sense of what is right. There's 3 women at the foot of the cross. Where are all the men? Yes, we know John was there. But they know where they're supposed to be. They know. They're in touch with the divine and the mystery of our faith. It comes much more easier to them. Much easier to them. We complicate it, don't we? We question it. Why do we question? So in this chivalric period is this desire to lay down one's life. Again, more voluntary suffering. And in the modern thought, we've lost it in the last 100 years. I think the World War II generation, my grandfather's generation, he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. That was it. If you had to look to the 20th century of the highlight of manhood, it would probably be that period when men behaved well. You know, the sexual revolution, the hypersexualized culture has really produced this fallout of what we're dealing with pornography, abortion, the contraceptive mentality. What does it mean to be a man? If I had to sum it up, it's to be a leader, protector, and a provider. A servant leader, in the model of Christ, to serve as Christ served. How did Christ serve? We'll see that in Holy Week. He washes the feet of his disciples. He's a sacrificial lover. He secures the well-being of all those in his care and periphery. This is what it means to be a man. So that's our framework. Now, let's talk about this crisis in manhood today. The crisis exists today because schools, universities, seminaries, can I say that? Seminaries? Without offending anybody? Have lost the proper understanding of what it means to be a man. That's what I've observed, that's what I've researched, and that's what I've heard. There's some good schools out there. My wife went to Franciscan University. Franciscan University has its problems. Life isn't better at Steubenville. It's more Catholic than Catholic University of America, where I went, but life isn't perfect at Steubenville. My wife said there's two vices at Steubenville, cursing and smoking. How would you like to send your kid to Steubenville and they come home cursing and smoking now, right? That would really, what a waste of my money. Now, it's a great school, don't get me wrong. Christendom, good schools, Thomas Aquinas, these are good schools, but they're not perfect. There's no safe zone for our kids, not even seminaries, right? Here's some reasons why I think there's a crisis in manhood today. The first reason, men are soft. And you know why? We invented the hot shower. Okay? Hot shower? Anybody like a hot shower? I love a hot shower. I took 2 at the hotel I was at. Just because I could. I think the invention of the hot shower has made us soft. How many of you are participating in Exodus 90? Oh, there's a man. Whoa, okay, good. Okay, good for you. Cold shower is a staple, that little movement, isn't it? Yeah, you love it. Look, it's just to say in general terms, in a funny way, that we've gotten soft. Men today are feminized in our school system. I taught. I have a master's degree in education. I taught in the same school that Benjamin Netanyahu went to school in Philadelphia. And Reggie Jackson would hit homers. Cheltenham High School. We have gender neutralized our classrooms, our playing fields. Girls are now playing boys' sports, and boys are playing girls' sports. My son plays football. I coach his football team. And I have to make a decision this year because he's approaching the 5th grade, and there's going to be girls on that team. Because I saw, because they're going to combine the 5th and 6th graders, and there's the 5th grade girl who's now in 6th grade. She's going to be on the team. And I have a decision to make. Do I put my son in that environment? He's got good friends. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't think I'm going to coach, for sure. I'm definitely not going to coach. I think it's confusing to boys. I think it's confusing to boys, especially as a father's. Thank you, finally. I agree. I think young boys need an environment where they can just be boys. And they can be surrounded by boys. I was with a coach who coached a team in New Jersey, and he had his captain of his football team, and they won a big game. And the girl on the team was a kicker. And she was in the front row of the bus after the game, and the boys are all celebrating on the bus, and the girl falls asleep, puts her head on the boy next to him, and that was the captain of the team. He said, I lost him for the rest of the season. That became his girlfriend, and he never was the same. He couldn't celebrate with his band of brothers. He couldn't celebrate. He couldn't be a boy. He couldn't, that's some of the best moments I can think of. Boys need to behave differently around girls, and I'm teaching my children not to hit girls, my boys not to hit their sisters. I don't want to foil that lesson. I'm sorry, I don't get it. I don't know why we're doing it. And trophies for every kid makes no sense. I don't get it. Amen. Fatherlessness. Yeah, I know. I hear you, brothers. I hear you. You know what? But this is why we're soft. This is what our kids are seeing and experiencing. And we're letting it happen. We're not raising any fuss. I emailed the board for the youth football, and I said, I caution this board. I'm really concerned about this policy. I said, my son and I are not sure whether we're going to be a part of the organization. I really challenge you to think about how this affects the development of young boys. and to consider changing this policy. And they came back and said, well, it's open to everybody, and this is our board stance, and this is what I said. Okay, it's just where things are moving. So we have this fatherlessness. Where's my identity if I don't have a father? I mean, Jesus needed to get his identity from Joseph, right? He had to affirm that in the Jewish law. He had to give him his name. He had to teach him Hebrew. Where's my identity? Who am I? Now the culture is going to say, I'm gay. You're gay. You're gender neutral. You're questioning gender. I'm a girl trapped in a boy's body. I'm neither male nor female. I'm raising my children in a gender fluid manner. Gender fluidity. I'm raising my children to decide when they get older what they are. This is how the Princess Diana's sons raising their child. The gender fluid raising of children. So this is toxic. All this is toxic, and it has created a feminized culture, a feminized man. It's feminized the church. 85% of church groups are led by women. Now, I'm not knocking the women that are involved in church leadership at all, but where the heck are the men? Now, I'm not saying we don't pay men enough in church circles. I've seen that firsthand. So men really can't support a family working within the church a lot of times. But still, we need more involvement. We need more leadership. And I applaud Marcus and his team for bringing me here to talk about some of these things. Because after this conference, if you just leave this conference as just a feel-good day, to come together with other men and to boost your Catholicism for a day, and to be that shot in the arm, it's Lent, let's just spend a day with the Lord. I don't know, I'm going to say I think you wasted your time. And I know that's judgmental for me to say. Because I think the organizers of this conference and all the conferences I spoke at around the country desire for the day to be taken back to the home and into the community. Now, I don't mean just by being a better father. That's important. Better husband. I mean taking your faith to action. Staying in small men's groups and building a band of brothers within your parish. I challenge you. There's a lot of challenges being thrown out today, and I like the challenges. Are you praying to be a saint? Have you asked the Lord to give you the grace to be a saint? I like that challenge that Joe put forward. I like the challenge to engage in the culture of death. I like the challenge to rediscover our fatherhood and our roles. My challenge to you is to bring 5 men, each and every one of you, to this conference next year. Each and every one of you, you have a year to do it, to round up 5 men. Because this facility can hold 500 people. And if we did that, we would fill this, we'd have to go to another probably venue. 5 men. Do you think you could raise up 5 men in a year? That you could invest in 5 men in 1 year. So much so that when you invited him to this conference next year, they would say, yes, I want to be a part of that. I think every one man in this room can do that, and I think you're kidding yourself if you don't think you can. Well, I don't have your charism. You don't need to have my charism, brother, to walk alongside another brother, to mentor, to befriend. All you have to do is inject yourself into their life. It requires some sacrifice. All right. So we have this culture dictating these answers. Now the APA, the American Psychological Association, you may have just seen this, said in their latest publication their guidelines to psychologists, you've probably seen this, that this is to be avoided. And fair warn all therapeutic practitioners that traditional masculinity is psychologically harmful. This is in their guidelines to psychologists and people who work with boys and men. Quote, traditional masculinity is psychologically harmful. These guidelines say that traditional masculinity marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression is on the whole harmful. Okay. This is the type of attitude that has created and will continue to create the feminized man that we've been talking about, who lack courage and the ability to properly lead, defend a family, and form mentor boys into men. This is happening in our schools because we're embracing this nonsense. If this were true, would have never have discovered a new world. If men weren't competitive, if men didn't have this desire to pursue something great, an aggression, if you will, something in them that wants to win. There's a competitiveness, a dominance there, a dominance to leave the cave and go out and face whatever's out in the wilderness. We'd still be in caves if we didn't have men like that. Now, I'm not talking about misogyny here. I'm not talking about being misogynistic. That's what I think some of the APA is referring to. But that's not what... A competitive spirit is not evil, nor is a dominant or aggressive spirit. It needs to be mastered. It's not on the whole harmful. All right, in my humble opinion, this is the type of man that we have often, in the last 30 to 40 years, sought to form in seminaries. And it's precisely the type of man that has allowed children to be abused at the hands of clergy. The fallout of such feminization of men is a deafening silence in our church about the harm that was being perpetrated. It's silence that's going to convict each one of us on our judgment day. The silence in the presence of evil. You knew that 4,000 babies were dying every day. What did you do about it? What did you do about it? Did you do anything? You knew that children were being harmed, sex trafficked today. You knew the multi-billion-dollar porn industry was invading your home, yet you didn't protect your children. You didn't put filters on your computer. They're not 100% men, but that's the minimum thing you have to do. Get Net Nanny. I just put Net Nanny on all my stuff. I got, for $55, I got it on 5 of my gadgets. Is your family worth $55 for a whole year to at least filter out all the potentially harmful things that your kids could stumble upon? Young kids are exposed to pornography through this. My kids don't even have a phone, yet they know how to use it. They know how to use it. They know how to navigate through it, and that's how porn is coming into their life. Ask yourself, here's another challenge to you. I don't want to give you too many because it's a lot today, but can you give up your phone one day a week? Do you slip into crisis if you can't find your phone? Where's my phone? I was at the Brooklyn Catholic Men's Conference. Funny story real quick and then we'll close. I was at the Brooklyn Catholic Men's Conference. Now, has anyone ever been to Brooklyn? Is anyone from Brooklyn? Okay, good. This will be perfect. You're from Brooklyn? Queens, okay. Well, is that considered, are you offended if I talk negatively about Brooklyn? Okay. All right, he's like, go for it. All right. So, we have a men's group. We have a Kingsmen group in Brooklyn. We have Kingsmen groups in like 20 dioceses. We've got 3 in the Archdiocese of Houston, and we'll talk about in the next talk about even starting one, other ones here, if you'd like. It's not about me, it's about you. We have a group in South Korea now. We had a group in Afghanistan. That was all through military bases. 2 groups in Europe, Switzerland. But anyhow, so I was in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Catholic Men's Conference, and I was talking about pornography and like how to deal with it. And I said the same thing, be able to give up your phone one day a week. It's a good measure. It's a good test of, where you stand with these material goods. Can you detach? If you can't detach, and I say do it on Sunday. It's a day of rest, right? I mean, maybe you have to prep the next day for work and someone's trying to get a hold of you. I get it. One day a week, right? I said, try it. Just try it, man. See if you can do it. So, and I was saying, we were just so attached to our phones. I mean, do you remember 15 years ago that we didn't even really have these things? And we lived, we survived, we got along. I remember my first job out of college, I had a beeper. Remember the beepers? Does anyone have a beeper anymore? You still got a beeper? Not anymore, right? You had to pull over and go to a payphone, right, if you had to call somebody? Where's the payphones? I don't even see any payphones anymore. So I'm not saying they're intrinsically evil, although on the back of my iPhone there's an apple or a fruit with a bite out of it. Okay, enough said. All right. Just kidding. So I'm in Brooklyn, and I talk to the guys, and I'm saying, yeah, dude, try this. So we're at lunch, right? And this Brooklyn guy. Now, one thing you got to know about Brooklyn is The F word is like the. Okay? Now, the is the most common English word in the English language, right? So the F word in Brooklyn is like the. It just fills the time, right, in conversation. So when I go to my Kingsman group there and I visit them, I have to like filter that and say, you know what? I'm not going to judge Brooklyn. I can pray for Brooklyn, but I can't fix Brooklyn. I'm not here to fix Brooklyn. Okay? I just pray for Brooklyn. So when I'm there and I'm just, my ears are hearing these words. So anyhow, I'm at the conference and they're at lunch and we're wrapping up. We're going to go back for another talk or whatever. And this guy goes into crisis. He can't find his phone. And he's F this, F that. He's like, my whole effing life is on this thing. Like, I need my effing phone. Where is it? It's just F. And it was just like, I just couldn't believe the irony of it all, right? Guess where his phone was? It was in the trash. Somebody threw it out. Somebody took his tray, and he was able to find his phone, and it was at the bottom of a trash can. I thought it was just a perfect metaphor for the situation, but anyhow. So they're not intrinsically evil, but you get the point. All right, so the crisis in masculinity is in truth a crisis of the proper formation of men, both in the home, on the playing fields, in our schools, and in the seminary. We have a crisis of courage today. And I think that's the greatest product of the fallout of this crisis in masculinity is this crisis of courage. From our bishops to laymen to everybody. It is our silence, again, that I said that's going to convict us on our judgment in the presence of evil. What you tried to do and what you didn't do, the Lord will reward you based on that. And you will be judged on that. What you said and what you didn't say. I believe that. I believe that the Lord has revealed certain things to us that you will be held accountable for. You're called to be faithful, not successful, as St. Teresa of Calcutta said. So you don't have to make the world perfect, right? Your job is not to necessarily change all this, but to be the change, as Mahatma Gandhi would say, that you want to see in the world. To be that change, to be that light in the darkness, to say the hard things, the difficult things, with great love. Speak the truth in love. That's what we do at the abortion mills. We speak the truth with great love and compassion. But I think we have to all look at that. How have I been silent in the midst of this in my own life? These are the realities of the times we live. Great crises raise up great saints. Just look to the past in the church. Think about the history of the church. Would you like to have lived in the 11th century when there were 33 popes? I was just at the Phoenix Catholic Men's Conference, and a priest got up and he said, you know there was 33 popes in the 11th century? And these weren't good popes. They were not good. They weren't doing good things. They were having children. They were having immoral lifestyles. St. Peter Damian was raised up to fight clerical abuse then. As the deacon shared with us, the great saints are going to be raised up at this time. St. Athanasius, St. Patrick, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Catherine of Siena, St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, Joan of Arc. You could just go on and on about all of it. So be of great joy in that you've been called for such a time as this, as Mordecai would say to Esther. Perhaps for such a time as this, dear brothers, you have been called. Don't curse the darkness. Be the light. In short, the answer to this crisis in masculinity is gatherings like this. This is the spark, right? This is the flame that you're going to take out in the world and set the world on fire, ablaze. You'll be inspired today to reclaim your masculinity if you've lost it. You'll awaken that greatness that is inside each and every one of you. You will summon forth virtue of fortitude, that courage to say the hard things when everyone is silent, to be brave when everyone is running from their responsibilities and duties to God and their family and the common good. This is an answer today. What will you do with this great gift? Some of the organizers last night, we had dinner, and I'll close with this, lamenting that, we don't have more guys here. And I lament that too. I'm in Philadelphia. We have about 5 million people, 1 million Catholics or whatever. We can barely generate 800 or 900 guys to our men's conference, which is happening today in Philadelphia. And we get very disappointed by that. Or we get sad or say, what are we doing wrong? I say, there's 200, 250 men in here that can change the state of Texas if it needs to be changed, because Texas is really a pretty good state, right? Lone Star, you guys are like shining star for pro-life movement, everything. But to change your community, Jesus changed the world with 12 men. Do you think 250 men could do some damage? You're darn right. Men, you have greatness in you. You know it. And you don't have to be leading an army. You don't have to be William Wallace. You just have to be obedient. You just have to get in Jesus' army and just do what he tells you to do. Take up those marching orders. Finally, the answer to coming together in small groups. That's the answer to the crisis of masculinity. Why? Because you have to fan this flame. You have to. It's too easy to get discouraged. It's too easy to walk away and say, I'm just one guy. I'm just one guy. One man with courage is a majority. I didn't say that. I wish I could say that. That was Andrew Jackson who said that. One man with courage is a majority. Are you that man? And by virtue of your baptism, yes, you are. You have the gift of courage. When was the last time you summoned forth your gift of courage from your confirmation? Now, you got to summon it forth. You can't just be like, I have it. No, you have to summon it. Call upon it. Come, spirit of courage. Come, spirit of chastity. Come, spirit of understanding, wisdom, knowledge. All those gifts you've been given. Pray for it to be unleashed. I'm not talking about a new charismatic type of renewal here. I'm just saying, you have it. Form a small men's group. Before, towards the end of lunch, we're going to have, for the guys that really want to get going, and Joe will plug this again. The guys that are like, sign me up. I want to start a men's group tomorrow, okay? I'm going to give a high-level 15-minute teaser, because I'm not going to be able to get into it in the next talk. I'm going to talk about forming men's groups in the next talk, but I'm going to give a high level, like, hey, I want to get started, and I want to get started now, like what you need to do. And that's going to be for 15 minutes. It's going to be over at my table over there as well, so you can pick up some materials if you want. But I believe that forming a band of brothers is not only is true to the spirit of why we come together for this, and the goal of this is to bring our faith to action, to take our faith home and into the community and do that kingdom work. That is the goal of this, but I believe it's the goal of your life. The goal of your life as a Christian, as a man, to use your gifts, your gifting, those qualities, the problem solving that you have, the voluntary suffering decision making that is just in you, to use that for God's glory. Because frankly, you've been given charisms from God. And one of your charisms is really you're in the gift of manhood, if I could say that. Like, God had a preference for a sex. He chose to be a man. What's his example? Okay, let's look at that. You have that in you. So use it. And the charisms that God has given you, some might have gifts from music, some might have gifts of administration, some might have gifts of healing, helps, encouragement, spiritual direction. Whatever those gifts are, I encourage you to discern them. I'll share a quick plug for St. Catherine of Siena Institute in Colorado Springs. If you want to discover what your charisms are for kingdom work, again, this is what God has given you to build up his kingdom on earth. First, I believe, is your manhood. But find out what those gifts are. You may already be in touch with them. You may know them already. One of the great ways to discover these things is in a small men's group. And when you come together in your band of brothers, what you'll experience is men will say, wow, I see this in you. Wow, when I talk to you, I feel better. You really encourage me. I can trust you. Or, you know what? You have the gift of evangelization. When you talk about God, I'm all in. When you speak, you have great knowledge. You might have the gift of knowledge. The point is, men, you have work to do. Coming to this conference is not the work. That's the easy part. Eating donuts is the easy part, right? They asked me last night, what was my favorite men's conference? This is my closing thought. I know I got more departures than the Queen Mary, but it's done after this, okay? This is it. So they said, what was your favorite men's conference? I said, it's got to be Guilford, Indiana. We have a Kingsman group there, and they did their own conference. They had over 1,000 guys come. And you know what they give guys for lunch there? Skyline. Skyline is a franchise that serves chili over pasta. Dude, could you not share? You can't give chili to people other than at a men's conference, right? You would not be able to do that at a women's conference. That wouldn't work at any conference. So that's my favorite because of the chili. But brothers, it's just a blessing to be with you. I look forward to sharing more with you later. We're going to be gearing up, Joe, wherever Joe is. We're going to be gearing up for our next thing. He'll tell you what that is. But thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you later. God bless.
All right, Mark Houck, everybody. Praise Jesus.